I am 90 years old. I spent 46 years as a geriatric nurse and home health aide supervisor, and I am going to tell you 5 things about bathing after 65 that your doctor has probably never told you, that the product companies definitely do not want you to know, and that most people learn too late, after the skin problems have started, after the falls have happened, after the dignity has been chipped away by routines that were never designed for an aging body in the first place. I have bathed more elderly people than I can count. I have supervised teams of aides who bathed elderly people for decades. I have sat with patients and their families at the exact moment when bathing went from being a private, ordinary thing to being a complicated, frightening, sometimes humiliating problem. And I have watched with a nurse's eye and a long memory what the right approach does versus what the wrong approach costs. I buried my husband Clarence in 2010 after 47 years of marriage. I buried my daughter Ruthie in 2003. She was 44 years old, and the diabetes took her the slow way, and I have never made peace with it, and I do not expect to. I lost my friend Vera, who was my nursing colleague for 29 years. I lost my brother Leroy. I have had enough loss to have earned the right to stop caring about things that don't matter. What has not stopped mattering to me, and what is the reason I am talking to you today, is the care of elderly bodies, real care, honest care, the kind that respects what the body actually needs rather than what makes other people more comfortable. So let me tell you the 5 things. Starting right now. I am not a fancy woman, and I want to tell you that plainly before you decide whether to keep listening. I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, the 3rd of 7 children, in a house where my mother washed us in a tin tub once a week and considered that perfectly sufficient because it was perfectly sufficient, and because she had 7 children and a house to run and was not operating under the impression that cleanliness required a daily ritual performed with 12 different products. I started nursing in 1957. I was 23 years old, and I started at the county hospital and then moved to home health because I found that the hospital treated patients like medical events and home health treated them like people. And I have always been more interested in people than in events. I spent 46 years going into homes and apartment buildings and the occasional farm where an elderly person was living their last years, and the question of how they bathed, how often, with what, with whose help, with what effect on their skin and their dignity and their sense of self, was never a trivial question. It was always a revealing one. The specific moment this whole conversation came into focus for me was a Monday morning in April of 1979. I was 45 years old, and I was visiting a woman named Edith Pryor, who was 82 and living alone in a small house outside of Montgomery. Edith had a daughter who visited on weekends and who had, with the best intentions in the world, established a daily shower routine for her mother that Edith was following faithfully. Edith's skin, when I examined her, was cracked and raw and inflamed from her collar to her ankles. Not from illness, from washing every day with hot water and soap on an 82-year-old body that was not equipped to tolerate what a 35-year-old body tolerates without a second thought. I looked at Edith's skin and I thought, somebody gave her the wrong information. And she followed it carefully, and it hurt her. And nobody noticed until I walked in. I have been thinking about Edith Pryor for 45 years. That is where this story starts. Here is the paradox I need you to sit with before I tell you the 5 facts, because if you don't understand it, the facts will sound like simple hygiene advice, and they are not simple hygiene advice. We live in a culture that treats daily bathing as a standard of hygiene and character. The shower you take every morning is not just about being clean, it is about being a person who takes care of themselves, who is confident, who is functioning. The freshly bathed body is, in our culture, the socially acceptable body. And that association runs so deep that when an elderly person's bathing routine changes, when it becomes less frequent or requires help, or involves modifications to the body's familiar relationship with water and soap, the change is almost always experienced as failure, as decline, as something to be corrected back toward the daily norm as quickly as possible. And that urgency to correct it, that cultural pressure to restore daily bathing as the standard, is doing real, measurable, unnecessary harm to elderly skin, elderly safety, and elderly dignity all across this country. Every single day. Because here is what the culture does not tell you, and what I am going to tell you today. The skin of a person over 65 is a fundamentally different organ than the skin of a person under 50. It produces less oil. It retains less moisture. It repairs itself more slowly. It is thinner. It is more reactive to temperature. It is more vulnerable to the mechanical action of scrubbing and the chemical action of soap. And the daily bathing routine that was perfectly appropriate at 40 is, for many people over 70, the single biggest contributor to the skin problems they and their doctors are spending time and money trying to treat. The paradox is this: the thing most families push hardest for daily bathing, because daily bathing means care, means cleanliness, means the person is being properly looked after, is often the thing causing the most harm to the body they are trying to care for. That is what Edith Pryor's daughter did not know. That is what I am going to make sure you know. Here are the 5 facts. Fact 1. After 65, most people do not need to bathe every day, and bathing every day may actively harm them. MHM. I know that is not what you expected to hear from a nurse. Let me tell you what I observed in 46 years of caring for elderly skin, and then you can decide what to do with it. Aging skin produces significantly less sebum, that is the natural oil that keeps skin supple and acts as a protective barrier, than younger skin. Every time you wash an elderly person's body with soap and water, you are removing what little protective oil the skin has managed to produce. At 30, the skin replenishes that oil quickly. At 75, it does not. The result for people who bathe daily with soap is chronically dry, cracked, fragile skin that becomes susceptible to infection, tears easily at minor contact, and is in a constant low-grade state of irritation that manifests as itching, redness, and discomfort. I saw this pattern in patient after patient over 46 years. And in every case, the family believed the daily bathing was evidence of good care. In many cases, it was the primary source of the problem we were trying to solve. Now I'll tell you what the research says, which aligns with what I observed. For most older adults, bathing 2 to 3 times per week is sufficient for hygiene and considerably better for skin health than daily bathing. The private areas, genitals, underarms, between the toes, can be cleaned daily with a warm, damp cloth without subjecting the entire body to the drying effects of a full bath or shower. This is not about being less clean. It is about understanding what clean actually requires versus what our cultural assumptions require. Your elderly parent's skin is not your skin. It does not need what your skin needs. Give it what it actually needs. Fact 2, the temperature of the water matters more than most people know, and most people get it wrong in the direction that causes the most harm. Hot water feels good. Hot water feels thorough. Hot water feels like it is doing the job. Hot water is for elderly skin, a consistent and underappreciated source of damage. Hot water strips the skin's protective oils faster and more completely than warm water. It dilates blood vessels in ways that can cause dizziness and falls, particularly dangerous in a bathroom environment where the surfaces are hard and wet. It can cause or worsen rosacea, eczema, and other skin conditions that become more common with age. And it has a paradoxical effect on skin moisture. It feels hydrating during the bath, but leaves the skin significantly drier afterward. In my 46 years, I cannot tell you how many patients I visited who had dry, irritated skin and who, when I asked about their bathing habits, described hot baths taken daily for comfort. The comfort was real. The cost to the skin was also real. and nobody had ever told them that the temperature of the water was relevant. Lukewarm water. Not cold. Cold is uncomfortable and counterproductive in its own ways. Lukewarm. The kind of temperature that does not feel dramatic in either direction. That is what elderly skin needs, and that is what most elderly people are not getting because hot feels like thorough and lukewarm feels like compromise. It is not a compromise. It is the correct choice for the correct reason. Fact 3. Most soap used on elderly skin is doing more harm than good, and the solution costs about the same as what you're already spending. I spent 46 years watching well-meaning family members and aides use the same soap on elderly bodies that they would use on a young person's skin, and wondering why the skin was perpetually dry and irritated. The answer was usually the soap. Commercial soap, even the mild, moisturizing kinds, has a pH that is significantly more alkaline than healthy skin. Young skin has buffering mechanisms that manage this difference. Aging skin has fewer of those mechanisms. The result is that regular soap, used regularly on elderly skin, disrupts the skin's acid mantle, its natural protective pH balance, in ways that make it more vulnerable to bacteria, more prone to dryness, and slower to heal from minor damage. What I used on my patients and what I recommend to anyone caring for an elderly body is a soap-free cleanser, a synthetic detergent. They are sometimes called Syndets, that is pH balanced to match the skin's natural acidity. They are available at any drugstore. They are not significantly more expensive than regular soap, and they do not strip the skin the way regular soap does. Now I'll tell you the second half of this fact, which is about moisturizing. The most important thing you can do for elderly skin after bathing is apply a fragrance-free moisturizer while the skin is still slightly damp, not after it is fully dry damp. The moisturizer traps the residual water in the skin rather than allowing it to evaporate. This is the difference between moisturizing that works and moisturizing that feels like it should work but doesn't produce the results you expect. Soap-free cleanser, lukewarm water, moisturizer on damp skin. These three things together transform the outcome for most elderly skin situations. Not a medical intervention, not a prescription, 3 product choices and 1 timing adjustment. Fact 4. The bathroom is the most dangerous room in the house for a person over 65, and most bathrooms have not been modified to reflect this fact. MHM. Let me be direct about this, because the statistics are not subtle. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death among adults 65 and older in the United States, and the bathroom, with its hard surfaces, wet floors, awkward postures, and thermal transitions is where a disproportionate number of those falls happen. I lost count of the number of patients I visited who had fall-related injuries that had occurred in the bathroom. Hip fractures, head injuries, wrist fractures from reaching for something to grab. In almost every case, the bathroom had not been modified in any way from the configuration it had when the person was 40 years old. The same tub with the same high step over, the same smooth tile floor, the same towel rack that was never designed to support weight, but that people grab in emergencies because there is nothing else to grab. The modifications that prevent most bathroom falls are not expensive and they are not complicated. A grab bar next to the toilet and inside the shower or tub, not a towel rack, a weight-bearing grab bar properly installed into a wall stud. A non-slip mat on every wet surface. A shower chair or bench that allows bathing in a seated position, which eliminates the balance demands of standing in a wet enclosure. A handheld shower head that can be directed without twisting or reaching. A nightlight that illuminates the path to the bathroom at 3 a.m. when the trip is made half awake. These modifications cost a fraction of one emergency room visit. They prevent falls that change everything. And most families wait until after a fall to install them, which is the same logic as installing a smoke alarm after the fire. Install the grab bar today, not after the fall. Today. Fact 5. Bathing for an elderly person who needs assistance is a dignity issue as much as a hygiene issue, and most families and caregivers handle the dignity part wrong, not from cruelty, but from not knowing what right looks like. I am going to be direct about this because in 46 years of supervising home health aides and observing family caregivers, the bathing interaction was the one I watched most carefully, because it was the one that most reliably revealed whether the person being bathed was being treated as a person or as a task. Bathing is intimate. It involves nakedness, vulnerability, physical touch in private areas, and a level of dependence that is fundamentally uncomfortable for most adults who have spent decades managing their own bodies independently. The transition from bathing yourself to needing help bathing is one of the most psychologically significant transitions of aging, and it is handled in most families almost entirely without acknowledgement of that significance. What I taught every aide I ever supervised, and what I want to tell every family caregiver right now, is this: before you help an elderly person bathe, talk to them. Tell them what you are going to do before you do it. Ask them what they prefer water temperature, the order in which they are washed, which cloth they like, whether they want to do the parts they can still manage themselves. Give them every decision that is genuinely available to give them, because the decisions are not about efficiency. They're about dignity. They're about the person remaining a person with preferences rather than becoming a body being processed. The 3 minutes of conversation before the bath is not a delay. It is the most important part of the bath. It is what separates care that leaves a person feeling respected from care that leaves them feeling. As one of my patients told me once with complete directness, like laundry. Nobody should feel like laundry. Not ever. Not at any age. And the 3 minutes of conversation before you pick up the washcloth is the difference.